This is Duke University.
For the purposes of my talk, I'm interested in understanding what is at stake when we consider a representative figure through whom the character and promise of American political inclusion can be reinvigorated again from those who have traditionally been excluded from this all too exhausted dream of inclusion. I begin with what I've elsewhere called the Latino question, and it goes something like this. The Latino population of the United States is currently at over 54 million. This makes Latinos, people of Latin American ancestry in the United States, the largest minority group in the country. Despite the daunting demographic reality, Latinos are still the most underrepresented group in American institutions and are proportionally the least likely to graduate from high school, much less college. Though Latinos account for nearly 17% of the population, if you're a Latino faculty member in a coveted tenure stream position, you represent less than 4% of the entire professoriate. Along with African American faculty, you're also twice as likely to be more in debt or living paycheck to paycheck than your Anglo-American or Asian American counterparts. Put more prosaically, education, once the true and tried route to social mobility and civic enfranchisement, has failed Latinos at most every turn. Sotomayor's story of accomplishment and her eventual rise to the pinnacle of American public life seemed to herald an important transformation that augured well for the legitimation and incorporation of Latinos into the fiber of American civic culture, or so it would seem. When President Obama introduced her at his nomination to replace Supreme Court Associate Justice Souter, he couched her life story within the emplotments of the American dream and its attendant narrative of inclusion and social mobility. Sotomayor's telling of her own life story read like a page from the National Multicultural Storybook of Inclusion, made possible by the American Dream narrative. The importance of Sotomayor's nomination and eventual confirmation was, of course, momentous. Supreme Court confirmations traditionally serve as bellwether indicators of either significant cultural change or the static perpetuation of the political status quo, just as Louis Brandeis, Thurgood Marshall, and Sandra Day O'Connor marked and signaled the greater acceptance of Jewish Americans, African Americans, women, into the country's circuits of power by being incorporated into one of its foundational institutions. Sotomayor's confirmation represented the fulfillment and promise of equality of access to opportunity that underwrites the founding narratives of what I'm here calling an ideologically driven narrative of the American dream. Indeed, from the nomination onward, Sotomayor began to be admired in a way that is intelligible in contemporary American culture by making her represent the elusive fulfillment of a seemingly exhausted American dream of inclusion. The image, the spectral image of inclusion, a black president, Latina justice, serves as proof that anything else that deals with race or racialization means that we are practicing reverse racism. Sonia Sotomayor has become, in the language of media studies, a media theme. The media theme is the most common unit of communication in mass-mediated modes of national myth-making and remembering. Media themes are quick encapsulations of stories that are themselves proxies for particular stories. Once a person's story or event is translated into a media theme, it ricochets through channels of mass communication with ease. In the process, the medium becomes the message at the expense of the story it indexes. Unlike the political soundbite, a media theme is a palimpsest of accumulated stories. These might be visual, sound, narrative, and so forth, that become a cultural shorthand for the more complex histories it references. The media theme is at once an object of cultural memory and, wittingly or not, a potential technology for historical forgetting. Given what demographers have called the Latinization of the United States, or what others have deridingly called the Latino Reconquista, connotations aside, those of you who have taken intro to Latin American studies will know this. It is imperative to understand the realignment of a social order that had yet to account for over 54 million bodies are largely absent from the national policy table and its attendant circuits of power. What is clear, and irrespective of our political proclivities, Sotomayor has become a representative Latina, a stand-in for Latinos writ large. But what happens when the use value of a media theme is as fleeting as the needs of the constituencies it serves? More specifically, if Sotomayor represents the fulfillment of the American dream of inclusion for scores of Latinos, and I think that would be problematic if it did, and it actually does, and the broader body politic as well, what are we to make of the evidence to the contrary? What are we to make of the scores of disenfranchised Latino bodies around us? I'd like to analyze Sotomayor's use value to our national pedagogies of inclusion and suggest that it is precisely because she is the exception to the evidence around us that we can and must endeavor to make sense of the broader Latino body politic in relation to the orders of abjecthood to which Latinos have been remanded through law and historical amnesia.